See more innovation in packaging and processing than anywhere else at PACK EXPO International. It's the show that defines where the industry is headed, with the solutions that establish where your business can go. Discover state-of-the-art packaging technology, processing equipment, new materials, sustainable solutions, supply chain resources, and much, much more. You'll walk away with innovative solutions to challenges big and small. Register at packexpointernational.com.
You're listening to Unpacked with PMMI, where we share the latest packaging and processing industry insights, research, and innovations to help you advance your business.
Hi, and welcome to Unpacked with PMMI. I'm your host, Sean Riley. In this episode, we break down economic trends shaping business with PMMI's Executive Leadership Conference presenter and economist, Lauren Saidel-Baker. From inflation and labor shortages to AI and productivity, she shares what companies should really be watching for over the next few years and why growth alone doesn't guarantee success. Let's have a listen. So with all the fancy introductions out of the way, welcome to the podcast, Lauren.
Thank you so much. So great to be here.
Oh, the pleasure is all ours. So there was two ways that I wanted to kind of start this, but I'm definitely leaning towards this way just because you used the phrase profitless prosperity. And it really stuck with me. It stuck with me when I saw your presentation at the ELC. So I want to get that explanation out there because I think that's a really kind of clear way that you explain that. So could you kind of explain to my listeners, what does that actually look like for packaging and processing OEMs in the day-to-day world, this profitless prosperity?
Sure. And I'm so glad you started here because I think that is the most important concept, really, that businesses are going to struggle with over the next, I'll say, 3 to 5 years. Profitless prosperity, it's essentially the view that you can grow your top line. I think that's going to be not easy in the coming environment, but relatively easier. Clearly, we're not in those boom times post-COVID anymore.
Right.
But there is so much inflation out there that if you're only focused on top-line sales, top-line revenue, I think you're going to miss really the bigger picture here if you're not laser focused on how your costs relate to the costs that you're passing through. That is a really clear recipe for margin erosion. So I think businesses, if they're not watching margins, if they're not watching actual end profitability, if you're just trying to hit some sales growth number, or hit some dollar value, that can get very murky. And certain business lines, they might not be profitable anymore. They might not be worth going after that business. And that's a tough choice when you might be more capacity constrained or just have labor issues that you can't find enough people to be working critical skilled roles. So different choices are going to have to be made. And it's important to know your own competitive advantages because pushing through those price increases, I know that's not fun. No one wants to have those conversations with customers, but they're really going to be more and more critical going forward.
Do you have, with the way costs are rising and inflation is kind of staying with us, how do they handle OEMs, how do we handle pricing without scaring the customers away?
That's the big question, right? Do you put through one price increase and be done with it? Or do you do maybe multiple tiered price increases? I think surcharges are a bad idea right now. I know that's the knee-jerk reaction to say the Strait of Hormuz is closed and oil prices are high, so let's just put a surcharge on. But to me, surcharge, it sounds temporary. It sounds like that will come off again with this will they, won't they open the strait, ceasefire kind of environment. But prices overall, inflation overall, it's not just oil prices. That's actually one of the more mild inflation drivers that we see. They're much more pervasive, a little bit more maybe insidious, and that's going to be the real challenge. It's the things that we're not focused on in the headlines that are driving up your cost.
Okay. And you touched on it a bit, but you talked about labor. Anyone that listens to this podcast, we talk about labor every time we have a podcast.
Yeah.
It's a real constraint. I guess where on your end are you seeing that OEMs feel that the most? And I don't know if you can suggest this as an economist, but I ask everybody, what can realistically can be done about it right now?
I'm glad you said realistically. Yeah. Actually, the easiest solution right now is to get into our time machine, go have more babies 20 years ago. If we can't do that and we can't increase the natural labor supply here, the Gen Z is now the generation aging into the workforce. I also don't think immigration is an easy one right now, not under the current kind of policies and administration priorities. So what we have to do is we just have to be better at attracting people. Maybe that's finding them earlier. I work with a number of companies who go right into high schools and they say, we have an internship program, a training program. When you come out, you will do exactly the job that we need done conveniently for us, but you'll have a guaranteed job conveniently for you. The kind of traditional 4-year college, university, that isn't necessary anymore. But I think the kind of social momentum is slow to shift to that realization. Yeah. Trade schools are really making a comeback. So I think, again, we're on that swing of the pendulum. It just could be going a little bit more quickly for some of these very skilled jobs. At the end of the day, though, it goes back to the first thing we're talking about. You can just pay more to attract people to your company and not the other guy. That's going to be a higher wage inflation cost driver that you need to be aware of, that you need to absolutely be budgeting for. So we are still seeing, even though wage inflation, is not quite so high as it was a couple of years ago, it's still relatively elevated. Most sectors are around that 4% range. That's higher than a lot of businesses are used to and consumers are used to. You think of this partly as just a cost of living adjustment before you even think about the salary increase, the merit increases.
It's unfortunate that there isn't, like you said, a magic bullet for this solution, because it seems to go through every, like I said, podcast that I have, and no matter what topic we're talking about, it just is what it is.
It is. Yeah. I think there are some things you can do. If you can increase your own productivity, that is really going to pay dividends. I met one CEO and he said, every time one of my employees comes up to me and asks for a raise, I say, yes, absolutely, 100%. But you need to tell me how I'm making more money to afford to pay you that raise. That was his boilerplate answer. And if they could come up with a good solution, then yes, he wanted to pay more. It wasn't that he was trying to keep wages down. Sure. But with profitless prosperity, with these increased cost pressures, you do have to know, how do we do more with less? How do we get better productivity? Maybe it's AI. I don't personally think AI is quite there yet, at least in this way with the OEMs. But if you can be that creative solution and find those ways to get ahead of the game, I think those companies will really be the winners here.
I can't let you say the AI without touching on it. That's interesting. So you're not bullish on it for a manufacturing type thing, or is it in general, or?
Yeah, I call myself a geriatric millennial when I know I sound like a curmudgeon saying AI is not all it's cracked up to be. Really, as I'm looking at AI, we are evaluating essentially just that, the productivity gains that AI can give us. And there's some evidence that the slope has turned upwards so that economy-wide, everyone's getting just a little bit more productive than normal. However, if you take this back to, I like the 90s as a good example, when computers were coming on the scene, right? The internet was coming about.
I've heard that as a reference point before. So that's
a great proxy. And we are not surpassing that growth rate. So it isn't that AI, ChatGPT, generative AI, all of these things, it's not just a right angle up that makes everything happen easier and more quickly. It's really iterative. And we still see relatively low adoption, especially in something like the manufacturing sector. It's just taking more time. The bigger companies are exceeding smaller companies just in having resources to develop and to devote to things like AI. So I said economy-wide, all sectors together, productivity is increasing at maybe a slightly higher clip than the past few years. But in manufacturing specifically, productivity is actually going backwards. We're actually getting less productive per labor hour. And so that's why I think there has to be something here. I really do think a company that hits on the right solution can use this and do better. Again, we saw that in the 90s, huge gains in manufacturing with that kind of earlier round of tech development. We haven't yet seen that hit with this round of AI.
Interesting. I just heard a younger generation all have a sigh of relief. They're not going to be able to have jobs because of AI, because that seems to be the fear that you hear out there.
Oh, no, they'll have jobs.
Okay, so let's go a little bit on the positive. For companies that are serving a mix of markets, where do you see the best opportunities? Where is there room for growth? Where is there room for people to take advantage of it in this sort of uncertain times?
Absolutely. Tech, anything high tech, computers, electronics, that really has been leading the way. Power generation is another one that we see a lot of opportunity just because we need so much more power to supply all that tech. But within, I would say, a more kind of core footprint here, I really like the pharmaceutical space. We've seen incredible gains there. In fact, pharmaceutical, it's technically classified in the bigger bucket of chemical production here in the United States. And if you take pharmaceutical out of the chemical bucket, Chem has been just basically flat. It's really all of the growth has been coming from pharma.
Really?
I don't expect that to slow down anytime soon as we have aging populations, just more and more resources developed or dedicated to the medical kind of segment.
Mhm.
Food is always a good one. It's relatively inelastic demand. So maybe that food, do you go to the restaurant versus the grocery store when you feel your budget being pinched? There will be some allocation like that. But even for something longer term, if we see major economic pain, some of those sectors will be very resilient. So if you need a core area to be in, I don't think that's a very bad one.
Okay, I like that. That's good. Okay, then you're talking to an OEM executive, and they're trying to plan their next, you want to say 3 to 5, I think is the little window you use.
Sure.
What are the biggest signals you'd tell them to look out for? What are the trends to look out for that things are going to get better, things are going to get worse? What should they be keeping abreast of?
The first thing they need to do is their own rates of change so that they know how they specifically relate to the broader sector and the broader economy. But if you just want a couple key indicators to watch, I'm really hanging my hat on the US consumer. I know we hear those dour headlines that everyone feels the pinch of inflation. Everyone sees how high gas prices are at the pump, but it never pays off to count the US consumer out. So the critical metric that I want to watch for them is real personal income. So that is income adjusted for inflation. If we start to see inflation taking a bigger bite out of our paychecks such that our wage gains are actually being more than eaten up by higher inflation, that would be a bad thing. We're not there yet. We've seen some leveling off in just how quickly our inflation adjusted wages are growing, but today that growth is still positive. Consumer spending makes up about 2/3 of GDP. So if you only follow one thing, I think the consumer should be that one thing. Now, I hope you follow more. There is a lot more out there to follow. But for just one benchmark, I think that's a pretty good one right now.
And if you had to predict, let's just say for fun, do you have an upslope coming? Is there...
So I think 26 is going to be a relatively healthy year, not runaway growth, nothing to write home about, but solid, steady. I think 27 might feel a little bit softer relatively. Some sectors likely to contract very, very mildly. I mean, just barely negative. Others just trending flatter. 28 should be the next real upswing. So if you're preparing for new growth, that's generally the timeline I would give someone in this sector. Obviously, different sectors lead and lag. So residential construction tends to move a year ahead of the cycle. Non-res moves a year behind. But most of the economy, most of the sectors we're talking about today, that is the general ebb and flow that I would give you.
I love it. I thank you so much, Lauren, for your candor, for coming on here and kind of putting the economy in understandable terms for me and our listeners. So we really appreciate you taking time out of your day to do this.
I'm so glad I could do it. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Unpacked with PMMI. If you liked what you heard, be sure to follow or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. That way, you won't miss any of the industry insights coming your way. While you're there, we'd really appreciate a rating or review. Want more? Visit pmmi.org/podcasts for all of our past episodes and additional resources. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll see you next time.